G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. 20th of September, first dog on the moon.
Can't wait. But first,
Thanks very much.
thanks
Cheers.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
5 to 10, time for a spot of this.
Hello, Patriots, and welcome to First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. I'm the Walkley Award-winning editorial cartoonist for The Guardian Australia, First Dog on the Moon. What a sad week. A bloke with so much potential, someone so full of actual life, who had so much to offer this nation, cut down in his prime, when all he wanted to do was to make Australia better. All he wanted was to play his part. No interest in the trappings of power. He just wanted a break. And yet before he could fulfill his true potential, he was cut down by circumstances beyond his control. It's so very sad. I'm speaking, of course, of Reza Barati, the 23-year-old asylum seeker who had his head crushed by a rock in detention on Manus Island in February last year. You remember him. Maybe you don't. Today, he's part of Tony Abbott's legacy. Reza was put there by the policies of former Prime Ministers Gillard, Rudd, and, of course, Abbott. You remember Abbott? You remember that guy? Imagine going down in history as the worst Prime Minister ever. Imagine, after years of bitter, divisive, cruel, ideological arse-hattery, to be cut down by a smug, glossy pair of trousers like Malcolm Turnbull. Abbott copping it right in the bicamerals. Although, let's be gracious, this isn't a time for gloating and taking Schadenfreude-esque pleasure in the suffering of someone who's done so much damage to the nation. Or is it? Prime Minister Anthony John Abbott, done and dumped. He served a whole year less as Prime Minister than Julia Gillard. Put that on a T-shirt, Tony. Should we feel sorry for him? He's suffered so much. Let's ask Reza Barati. Oh, wait, we can't. He's lying in an anonymous pauper's grave, wherever it is. So what will be carved on Tony's political tombstone? He crafted the death, torture and refoulement of asylum seekers into a catchphrase, achieved very little while cheapening our already dreadful political discourse below the level of human comprehension. And the saddest part is that you people out there are so delighted, except for the fruitcakes, of course. The rest of you latte-snorting inner-city elites, cackling as you pour organic quinoa-flavoured Pinot Grigio into your artisanal underpants and rub pages of the Saturday paper over your painfully erect nipples. It's disgusting. And the febrile treachery-rewarding media, they didn't help either. Of course, Malcolm will be much nicer. Keep telling yourselves that as Malcolm waits until his polling is better than the opposition leader Bad Sex Toys. Oh, there it is now. And then he'll drag the government firmly to the left. I reckon about 3 centimetres, exactly enough to win in the next election. And the one after that, and the one after that. Think about that, people. He won't close the camps, and he won't do much about climate change. And good luck to you if you think he will. Anyway, enjoy it while it lasts. Roll around in it, kids. There aren't many times in life you see someone as awful as Tony get their comeuppance so thoroughly when it's so justly deserved. Remember when Tony described the automotive workers being fired as people who were liberated to pursue other opportunities? Who's liberated now, sunshine? We'll always remember when you coined the phrase, the worst Prime Minister in history, and then went on to embody it more thoroughly than we thought possible. What a legacy. What a legacy. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, champ. This has been First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. You're welcome.
Well, that was just delightful. All pretty true, of course. It's been really almost irritating, the number of people who've been ventilating outrage at the way Tony Abbott lost his prime ministership because they seem to have swallowed his propaganda to the effect that he was elected Australian Prime Minister by the Australian people and only the Australian people should be able to defenestrate him, which means throw him out the window. It's as if everybody, or a great number of people, have swallowed hook, line and sinker the idea that Australia has a presidential system of government just because the Liberal Party and the Labor Party have been running presidential campaigns. I mean, it's at least 20 years, 50 years perhaps, since they started organising their federal campaigns around the party leader who hoped to either retain the prime ministership or to achieve the prime ministership. But I was talking to some young people a couple of days ago, and they'd never quite put it together that in the same way that when you vote for the town council, you elect people to sit on the council, and once they get into council, then the councillors among them have a ballot to vote for who's going to be mayor and who's going to be deputy mayor. The people in the town, the people in the shire, the people who elect the councillors, they don't get to elect the mayor. In that same way, we get to vote for our local member of parliament, in my case, Barney Baby Joyce. We call him Barney Baby Joyce because the rest of his brothers went to De La Salle College, Armidale, where I went to school for a couple of years, and Barney Baby Joyce was too young to get there because De La Salle College, Armidale closed at the end of 1974 as a boarding school. It became O'Connor High. That's why Barney Baby Joyce went off to St Ignatius Riverview to hobnob with the squattocracy. And that's where he met Tony Abbott. However, what I was saying is we vote for the local member of parliament. Whichever party has the numbers on the floor of parliament, they get to form the government, in the same way that whoever wins the town wins election to the town council, they form the council. The party room then votes on who they want to have as their leader and their deputy leader. The people in Australia have never, ever in the history of Australia had any vote on who gets to be the leader of the party, which is who gets to be the Prime Minister. It's why, after the ascension of Malcolm turning bull, the very first thing the National Party said was, oh, well, like we actually had a coalition agreement between Warren Truss and Tony Abbott. The National Party has no coalition agreement with the Liberal Party. You'll have to talk to us if you want our help to remain in government. So Malcolm turning bull, he's pretty good at revolving. Maybe he's got one of those motorised barbecue spits up his ass. He was once upon a time a merchant banker who was responsible for financing a forestry operation that turned a couple of South Pacific islands into desert rocks. And then suddenly he was the darling of the Greenies, who thought that he was the least rapacious right-wing redneck in the whole of the Liberal Party. And that's why the Liberal Party hated him, was because when he was leader of the Liberal Party, Malcolm turning bull was in favour of an emission trading scheme because that had been introduced as a policy by John Howard and it was supported by Kevin Rudd. So therefore there was bipartisan support for doing something that had the potential to become significant about global warming. Because Malcolm turning bull understood enough science to understand that it is a problem. We've got to do something about it. We can't pretend that it's not there and wish it out of existence. So the extreme right-wing Looney Tunes Bureau of the Liberal Party decided they couldn't possibly have that. They had to have somebody to oppose Rudd. And, climate science was absolute crap, said Abbott, but he didn't say it very often and very loudly. The coup that toppled Turnbull was actually supposed to elect Joe Hockey as the leader in our opposition, but he couldn't get up. And then the people who supported Hockey deserted him and shifted to the Abbott camp, and Abbott won against Turnbull by a single vote 6 years ago. He won the leader of the opposition's position. Turning bull just kicked Abbott out of the seat with a 10-vote majority, 54 to 44. So we could say that Tony Abbott's bad karma has returned to him with 10 times the strength of what he did to Turnbull. Everything they said about him going down in history as the worst prime muppet since Federation is absolutely true. He was the biggest bloody liar. He said he wasn't going to touch ABC funding. He wasn't going to touch education. He wasn't going to touch public health. He wasn't going to touch legal aid. He wasn't going to touch community services. He wasn't going to, try and introduce a scheme where unemployed young people had to starve for 6 months rather than pay them the dole. He was going to be a really nice bloke until he got into power. And then everything he touched turned to shit in front of his very eyes. And he's been dying a death of 1,000 cuts in the public eye ever since he decided that the Queen's consort needed to become a Knight of the Order of Australia. First, he reintroduced knighthoods, and then he declared the Queen's husband didn't have enough obsequious decorations from wannabe potentates of obscure foreign powers, which is pretty much what Australia looks like when you live in England. As the Greekling Queen's consort Prince Philip does. Yeah, so what was the immediate proximal cause of Tony Abbott getting the spear? I think probably when he talked about that 3-year-old drowned Syrian baby on the beach. And he said, this is why, Europe should take a leaf from Australia's books and do something to stop the boats because, you just have to contain them and push them back into the ocean so that, presumably when they drown, they don't wash up quite so close to where somebody might see them. Yeah. That sort of changed pretty soon into the idea that Australia's going to let 12,000 people come from Syria to Australia, but they've got to come from a camp in, say, Jordan or somewhere. And he was trying to introduce the idea that they were going to give preference to Christian families. So you've got to have the cross stamped on your forehead or something, and ideally women and children, and he probably was going to do what he could to block any men of military age. So anyway, Tony's gone. He's gone. Tony scones. CWA can cook up a new recipe. Tony scones. They can eat them while they're drinking tea tomorrow morning. But Malcolm Turnbull had the consistent approval rating, higher approval rating as preferred Prime Minister of the Australian people the entire time that Abbott was Prime Minister, and for about half the time that Rudd and Gillard were Prime Ministers. Turnbull had that highest priority approval rating, most preferred Prime Minister, with the Australian population per se as a whole, because out of all the Liberals, he was the one that Labor voters and Green voters preferred. Have him. If you've got to have a Liberal Prime Minister, put Turnbull in the role because of what he said he believed regarding things like gay marriage and environmental trading protection, trading schemes, carbon trading schemes, emission trading schemes. What did Turnbull have to do in order to get a coalition agreement out of the National Party? He took responsibility for the Murray-Darling Basin Commission away from the portfolio of environment, and he gave it to Barney Baby Joyce, the dingbat from here. Well, he actually comes from Danglemar, which is a tiny little railway station sort of between Murrurundi and Tamworth. Barney Baby Joyce is now going to manage the Murray-Darling Basin for the benefit of his mates in the irrigation lobby, who got the shits at the idea that they're not allowed to suck every fucking drop of water that's in the river out of it because they can't bear to see water go past their own door. They regard water in the river as being wasted unless they can suck it up and put it through their pump and spray it on the ground so that they can salinate their fields, because runoff water is more salty than what falls out of the sky. God, the next silliest thing they'll want to do is dig holes in the ground and get underground water, because that's even saltier. And, if irrigation exceeds precipitation, then salination is inevitable. And guess who discovered that? The fucking ancient Babylonians, when they sowed their fields with salt by digging wells to irrigate their fields. Why did they do that? Well, they had to do that because they'd cut down all the trees to have broadacre agriculture. When they cut down the trees, the rainfall dropped. Oh dear. Turning Bull's going to do everything that Tony Abbott was going to do. They've just got a new suit and a better elocution lesson on the salesman. So hopefully Australians will see sense at the next election. Until then, we're in for a rocky ride. Yep, that's what's going to happen. It's all about to get worse. Wauble's on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.